Speaking Grief is a new project from WPSU. It's a multi-platform project aimed at helping us create a more grief-aware society. So as part of this project, we made an hour-long documentary that explores what grief is, what it's not, kind of gives us more understanding of grief and how we can show up for each other and get better at supporting it. And then we are extending that conversation on our website, which will have a lot more stories and resources for both people who are grieving and for people who are looking to support someone who's grieving. We're doing a lot on social media and really using that as a learning tool to extend that conversation even further. And then at some point, we will resume our plans for a lot of live events that we have scheduled around the country to screen the film and again, keep that conversation going. Grief is, I think it's fair to say, maybe the only universal experience, is the only thing we all share that we're guaranteed in this life, that we lose things, we lose people, we lose things that we love that are important to us. So it's something that we all go through, but we don't talk about it because I think we tend to label it as this negative thing. And there's all kinds of grief. We're finding that out right now. There's so many different things that we grieve, but in this project we focused on death-related grief and people who are grieving the loss of a family member. And I think one thing for me that really highlighted how important this is that when I was out on the road traveling for productions, I would, get in my Uber at the end of a production day and start talking with the driver, and they would ask me why I was in town, and I would explain that I was doing a documentary and it was about grief, and without fail, people would say, "Oh, I have a grief story," or they would start, "Let me tell you about my brother who died when I was a teenager. Let me tell you about my mom who was sick, or I've lost so many people." And it would always open the door to this conversation. And I just remember thinking, wow, people are never given this opportunity to just share this really fundamental, universal human experience. And it was kind of astounding that we don't talk about it more. So I think seeing what happens when you do just open the door to those conversations and how much people are carrying that they need to share is really powerful. Grief is a normal, healthy thing, but that we don't treat it that way, so that people tend to feel isolated in their grief, and then the people who want most to show up for them also feel helpless in their ability to support grief. And that's what we're trying to make better for people. Like, there is no, I've learned that there's no right way to do this. It's going to change person to person, grief to grief, experience to experience, and even day to day in some instances. So it's important to stay humble and flexible when you're there trying to show up for someone. And then something that I was just reminded of a couple days ago when I was looking at some of the footage from this project that I heard from almost every person was how much they wish that people would talk about the person who died, how much they wish they would say their person's name or share a memory or just ask a question. And I think it was really powerful for me to get to see that, because I would be sitting across from people and we'd be talking and they'd have sort of their normal countenance on. And when I would ask them to share something about their person who died, their faces would light up. It was so dramatic and so pronounced, and getting to see that over and over and over really hammered home how important that is, but how little we give people the opportunity to do that. And again, not from a place of a lack of wanting to support them. It's because we have these misconceptions. We think if I bring up your person who died, I'm going to make you sad, or I'm going to remind you that they're gone. And the reality is they're aware in every fiber of their being every day that their person's gone. But by you saying their name or talking about them, it helps keep them alive, and it reassures them that they know that other people are missing and remembering that person too. I think the most profound way, because there's a lot of ways, is it's just really made me even more aware of how much everybody carries. And you'll see in the film, we try to think of a way to illustrate this, just thinking about we all carry these losses with us. And again, we're focusing on the loss of people, but there's so many things that everyone's bringing with them every day that they're walking with and that we need to create space for that, and we need to recognize that people have these experiences, that people have good days and bad days, and we need to figure out how to make it okay for people to share that, and we need to work on making ourselves safe places where people can go when they need to share that. And that starts by just acknowledging that it's out there, that people are carrying this, and that it's hard, and that people feel alone, but that if we can open those conversations, you know, we can't fix it, we can't cheer them up or make it better, but we can at least make them feel like they're not alone, that they have somebody sitting with them, that we have somebody sitting with us, because I don't want to say it like us and them, because we're all grievers. When the current pandemic started to really take off and become what it is now, a colleague of mine had sent me an article that I think had the headline of "That discomfort you're feeling right now is grief." And I thought that was so important because, you know, I recognize that I've worked in a space where I've kind of thought and done nothing but think about grief for a couple years now. But I think a lot of us, we don't have the language, and we don't even, we're so uncomfortable with grief. We're so not used to talking about it that we don't even recognize our own grief experiences sometimes. And I think we tend to downplay or like delegitimize our own griefs, because we're all grieving a million little things right now. We're grieving seeing our friends or going outside or our kids' birthday parties, and those are all legitimate and valid grief experiences, but we don't name them as that. So I think bringing that into the consciousness that like this is grief, you're going through grief every single day, and obviously there's grief on huge tragic scales that people are, you know, dying from this pandemic and dying in isolation. Those are, you know, really tragic, blatant examples of grief, but there's so much grief that each of us are finding every day. And I think I know for me, like every time I think I've realized all the things I've worked through, like something else will pop up that makes me realize that I suffered another little loss and I'm sad about that. So I think if we can come to that from a place of compassion for ourselves, that what you're feeling is legitimate, it's grief, and you're allowed to feel that, but then also kind of filing that away and staying conscious of what that feels like. And the next time you are faced with one of those big, you know, kind of tragic examples of grief, that you can draw on that experience and remember how that felt for you on whatever scale you experienced it, and then bring that forward in an act of empathy when you're trying to show up for the other people in your life. I just want to say that one of the things we tried to do very hard in this project is to make it something that anybody could connect with, regardless of what kind of experience they've had in their life. So we definitely did try to explore the reality of grief and validate that as a normal experience. So we wanted to have things that people who are kind of actively grieving could connect to, but then we also worked really hard to make it something that even if you feel like you have never had one of those gigantic losses and gigantic grief experiences, and that maybe this feels like new or scary to you, that it's, you know, that it is a normal experience. You don't have to be scared of it, and it's something that we tried to make it that you could come to this project and walk away feeling a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more prepared for the next time you do encounter grief. So really, this project is for everybody. I just want to share that, like, and also we're all grievers. We all, like I said, we all grieve all these things every single day, so that no matter where you feel you fall in that spectrum, there's no need to be intimidated by having this conversation.